The U.S. military strikes another alleged drug boat, killing 2. Number of vessels struck so far, 8. Death toll, at least 34. This is undoubtedly a new era in a long-running U.S. drug war. The shutdown persists. The Senate stalled. The House shuttered. Government functions strained. So what's next? We ask Washington Democratic Congressman Adam Smith. Texas Senator Ted Cruz on air traffic control, airport security, what I mentioned before, President Trump's drug war, and the reach of free speech now that Jimmy Kimmel's back. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. We're going to start tonight with drug deaths in America. From April 2024 to April of this year, 76,516 Americans died of drug overdoses. That number comes from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. By comparison, less than 40,000 Americans died in traffic fatalities in 2024. And just by also comparison, in 2023, drug overdose deaths in America exceeded 105,000. And of those, about 70% came from synthetic opioids. Opioids, that's the proper pronunciation. Primarily fentanyl, and even nastier substances mixed with fentanyl. This is a gigantic problem for our country. But Venezuela is not part of the fentanyl problem. Neither is neighboring Colombia. Numerous government databases say exactly the same thing. Mexico is the source of fentanyl in America, with help from China. Let me read from the State Department's 2025 International Narcotics Control Strategy Report. Quote, Mexico was again the most significant source of illicit fentanyl and fentanyl analogs, and companies in China remain the largest source of precursor chemicals and equipment to manufacture illicit fentanyl. Venezuela produces no fentanyl. It is a transit hub for cocaine. Much of that comes from Colombia, the world's largest cocaine producer. The Venezuelan military reaps illegal profits from that cocaine trade, that's for sure. Importantly, South American cocaine flows to America via the Pacific, not the Caribbean. Until today, the U.S. military had not struck a single vessel in the Pacific. 7 suspected drug vessels were blown up in the Caribbean. Today, 1 in the Pacific. You can see the video playing right there. 2 people were aboard that vessel, and they were killed. 2 of them were killed. 34 people so far have been killed in this armed conflict. That's the administration's phraseology. There's also a covert operation of some kind President Trump has approved inside Venezuela. Venezuela, again, not a source of fentanyl. So, is this all about something else? Is it about regime change in Venezuela? What is legal or illegal about all of these military strikes? And did this widening military campaign lead to the early retirement of the admiral overseeing it? Do these alleged drug boats pose the same threat to America as al-Qaeda? The defense secretary today said they did. We will discuss the implications of all this with Congressman Adam Smith. You see him right there. He's the ranking Democrat on the Armed Services Committee. And as well, we'll discuss it with Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz a bit later in the program. But first, we turn to our Aaron Navarro, who is at the White House. Aaron, I was going to turn that way, but that's where Adam Smith is. I'm going to look straight ahead to Aaron Navarro, because there he is. Aaron, tell us about what we know about what happened today with this 8th military strike against an alleged drug vessel.
Major, you brought up one important point in that this was the first vessel that the administration has hit that was on the Pacific side of South America rather than in the Caribbean. I thought that was notable. A defense official said that the vessel came from the international it was in international waters off the coast of Colombia specifically, and as you mentioned, 2 individuals on this vessel were killed, according to an ex-post from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and that has been the pattern in these strikes. The secretary will post videos of them accompanied by some details from the Defense Department about them. It's important to note as well, you mentioned that at least 34 people have been killed in these strikes that many Democrats in Congress have challenged the legality of, while the administration has also told Congress that the U.S. is, quote, in a non-international armed conflict with drug cartels and leans on that kind of notice as the argument behind these strikes and the larger effort against these alleged drug shipping happening in these waters.
And Aaron, there's been some developments at the White House today regarding Russia, potential sanctions, comments from the Treasury Secretary and the like. What can you tell us?
Yeah, the Treasury Department just announced direct sanctions on Russia's largest oil companies. They said that this was due to, quote, a lack of serious commitment to a peace process to end the war in Ukraine. This comes the same week that we saw that potential Budapest summit between President Trump and Russian President Putin seem to fall apart. The sanctions will target the Rosneft and Lukoil oil companies as well as their subsidies. And the Treasury Department says it pretty blatantly in the release that the goal is to put pressure on Russia's energy sector and the Kremlin's ability to raise revenue for its military in their war with Ukraine. We know that the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is meeting with President Trump this afternoon in the Oval Office with a pretty big focus on this Ukraine-Russia war and seeing if they can line up the priorities of Europe and NATO with what President Trump is thinking in terms of ending the war and what the terms will look like.
Aaron Navarro at the White House, thank you very much. Washington Democratic Congressman and Chairman and ranking Democrat of the House Armed Services Committee, Adam Smith, joins me now. Congressman, good to see you. You heard, I believe, my intro about what's going on off the coast of Venezuela, Colombia, and now in the Pacific. What's your reaction? What do you believe you need to know that you haven't learned so far?
Well, there's been a complete lack of transparency on exactly what we're doing and why. And who exactly we're targeting. As you mentioned, the main focus of the rhetoric that we hear coming out of the White House is fentanyl, fentanyl, fentanyl. And yet the people they're attacking, as you said quite well, are not involved at all in the fentanyl trade. If the United States military is going to use lethal force, basically, no trial, we're just going to fire the shots and kill people, you need to be 100% clear on why, what you're doing, and what it's supposed to be accomplishing. There is no clarity on that coming from the White House. So they've mentioned fentanyl. Occasionally they will hint, as you said, at regime change. But is that the reason or isn't it? We can't have the United States military using lethal force, killing dozens of people, and not even be clear why or what it is that it's supposed to accomplish. That is bad policy. And also it is arguably illegal and against the U.S. Constitution.
What about what happened recently with the Admiral of Southern Command, who announced his retirement 2 years before his term as Admiral of Southern Command was due to end?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty clear that Admiral Halsey had problems with the orders that he was being asked to carry out. I don't know of a precedent for a combatant commander leaving their post 2 years early, certainly not in the midst of this level of controversy. So I think, we often have this discussion, and given President Trump's authoritarian tendencies in terms of how he views the presidency, there's considerable concern within the military. What do you do if you are asked to carry out an illegal order? Well, first of all, you have to determine whether or not the order is illegal. But if you believe it is illegal, your obligation is to not carry it out. And I think it's distinctly possible that is why Admiral Halsey is retiring early. We don't know for sure. There have been rumors, but certainly the circumstances give rise to the question, and I think it ought to be answered.
What do you think about the Defense Secretary's contention that these vessels being struck by the U.S. military are as much of a threat to America as al-Qaeda?
I think that's positively idiotic, and it scares the hell out of me to think that we've got a Secretary of Defense who is that clueless about the threats that we face. Al-Qaeda, came and targeted the United States of America and killed 3,000 people intentionally, on purpose, with a stated desire to basically destroy the United States of America and to kill Americans anywhere that they could. The drug trade, as you rightly point out, is a scourge upon America, but it's not a group of people trying to kill Americans or destabilizing the government. It's a business we should shut down, but to equate that with an armed group that is bent on the absolute destruction of America, I mean, that's a level of thinking that should be troubling to anybody in terms of how we're approaching this. And I also, on the drug trade, again, fentanyl is what's killing people. And we're not targeting fentanyl, number one. Number two, with the drug trade, it is as much of a demand problem as it is a supply problem. We have been shutting down drug trade for decades. and yet people keep finding a way because the demand is so high. We need to focus on that aspect of the problem. Equating this to a shooting war, I think, is a clueless approach to how to deal with the very real problem of drugs that we have in this country.
Congressman, let's talk about the shutdown. I want to play sound for you from today from the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Let's play it.
Here's the kicker. The Democrats can't even agree on what they want right now. If you polled congressional Democrats on what it would take to reopen the government, you would not get a uniform answer.
Your response?
Yeah, well, so what is my response? Look, we're a big coalition. We are not part of a cult. We do not simply salute one leader, and if he says one thing one day and the exact opposite the next, we go ahead and agree with it. The point is, negotiate with our leadership. Mike Johnson has been saying things like that. Meanwhile, he shut down the House. The House is not in session. That is unprecedented. I've been through a number of government shutdowns. Every single one, House was in session trying to solve the problem. Number two, if Mike Johnson wants to know what Democrats want, negotiate. Let's talk. And I can tell you at the top of that list is health care. And that has been very, very clear. As of November 1st, people will have to make their selections. Without an extension of the health care tax credits for the ACA, millions of people will lose their health insurance. Millions of more will see their costs skyrocket. And Mike Johnson's response was, well, we're just going to extend the government until November 21st, which is too late. Not going to deal with it. But more than anything, he should be negotiating. He wants Democratic votes. He needs Democratic votes in the Senate. And his answer is, no, Democrats just have to vote for what we say. They have to vote for the Republican budget, and we won't even talk to them. We won't even negotiate. And then to demand that? So whether or not you can poll, how many ever Democrats there are in the country and get a slightly different answer, for the Speaker of the House to be acting like that is a relevant fact in this debate is ridiculous. We have our leadership. Negotiate with them. He has refused to do that since mid-September, and he's refused to even have the United States House in session doing its job. There are other things that we could be doing that are important to this country, but Mike Johnson has shut down the United States Congress, and that simply enhances the power of President Trump, and I have to believe that's a big part of the reason of why he's doing it. He's abdicating the responsibility of the legislative branch, abdicating his responsibility as Speaker of the House. There was a member of Congress who said he wanted Donald Trump to be Speaker of the House. He's gotten his wish. That's effectively what's happening here. Congress should exist, and we should do our job, and Mike Johnson has abdicated that responsibility.
Absent a willingness from the Republican leadership in the Senate to negotiate, how does this end, Congressman Smith?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, there's a couple of different possibilities. We have heard that the White House does understand the problem with health care. Thus far, they haven't taken the step to want to do anything about it. But hopefully, as we've shown a light on this particular problem, that gets people to pay more attention to it. And it may well end with Democrats saying, look, as we get to November 1st, our opportunity to address this health care crisis has kind of passed. The Republicans have shown they don't care. They don't care about people losing their health insurance. They don't care about the health costs going up. So maybe we need to come into some other type of an agreement. That is possible. But it is absolutely crucial that Democrats did what we did on October 1st and didn't just sign up for a budget that was going to continue the Trump budget, continue the Trump government, and do nothing to address the health care crisis, which was coming at us in a matter of weeks. So it is possible that we shift tactics in terms of how to get their attention, but the issue is incredibly important. It is just really, really unfortunate that the Republicans don't seem to want to address it or deal with it in any manner.
Washington Democratic Congressman Adam Smith, I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Major.
Let's turn now to Nicole Killian, also on Capitol Hill. And Nicole, you have been trying to find some practical ways to explain what's happening with this shutdown as it relates not so much to services, but those who are employed in the federal government. Tell me what you've learned.
Yeah, that's right. Well, keep in mind that the Senate is voting yet again on a temporary government funding package, but we don't expect the outcome to be any different than it has been over the last 22 days, as we are now in the second longest shutdown in history. And this is having some real world consequences. We visited a food bank just this week that was stood up just for the purpose of helping some of these furloughed federal workers. Take a listen to what they told us. How are you dealing with that uncertainty?
Just one day at a time. I'm trying not to stress out about it, but I just need to know when it's going to end so I can go back to work and get paid.
I've always been kind of savvy enough to kind of take care of myself and try to be there. And I feel like, hey, if there's more deserving families or there are more people in need that needs these resources, then yes, go ahead to do it. But now it seems like I'm maybe falling into that same category as well.
It's a heavy impact because not just the shutdown, it's people that's getting ripped as well too, that's losing their job. The reduction in force, that's kind of terrible.
And I would point out that all of those workers that we spoke to are career federal employees who simply want to get back to work. They say it's really time to stop trading these political talking points and get down to business. That being said, as I mentioned, we know the Senate is voting again on a temporary funding bill tomorrow. We expect the Senate will take up another measure, potentially to try to pay some of the federal workers who have been working without pay during the shutdown.
And is there any sense, Nicole, that that particular alternative that you just mentioned, paying some federal workers, in itself might be a logjam breaker, maybe not resolve all of this, but at least have bipartisan support for that? Or no, is that going to be subject to the same partisan tensions and divisions?
I think the latter. I mean, look, you know, at this point, this is a bill that was introduced by Senator Ron Johnson, but already we know that Democrats are crafting a countermeasure to this. You know, they see this as just political posturing on the part of Republicans trying to make them take tough votes. But again, as I mentioned, there are real world consequences to this. We've obviously seen the White House have to step in to pay troops. And there is a sentiment here on Capitol Hill that if they can do something to try to help some of these federal workers, they at least want to try to make an attempt.
Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill, thank you very much. Next on the Takeout, Senator Ted Cruz on the government shutdown, airport delays it's causing, and his views on freedom of speech in the wake of Jimmy Kimmel's brief suspension and return to the air. Is Project 2025 architect Russell Vought using the government shutdown to expand his base of power and do more in that space? Well, we're going to examine that.
You probably hear the beautiful sound of construction to the back. You hear that sound? Oh, that's music to my ears.
Simple expansion or kind of an East Wing teardown? President Trump's $250 million White House ballroom, and why it's not music to everyone's ears. The Takeout returns, I'm happy to say, in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz joins me now from Capitol Hill. He is chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee. Senator, great to have you with us. You pay very close attention in your chairmanship to air traffic controlling, TSA, and all related airport matters. What's happening with the shutdown and the real-world impact on Americans traveling?
Well, look, there are real-world delays. We're seeing flights being canceled. We're on day 22 of the Schumer shutdown, and this shutdown needs to end. Right now, today, there are 50,000 TSA employees who are going into work, and they're not getting paid. There are 14,000 air traffic controllers that are going into work, and they're not getting paid. And this is wrong, and we're ending up we're seeing delays. Houston Hobby Airport last night had a ground stop because of a shortage of air traffic controllers, and these problems will only get worse. And Major, I got to say, the Democrats are really cynical about this. One Democrat senior aide told Politico that the shutdown will continue, quote, until planes start falling from the sky. Well, that's not funny, and it's utterly irresponsible. And this is visiting pain on a whole lot of federal workers for no point whatsoever other than to throw a political temper tantrum and for Chuck Schumer to prove to his left-wing base that he really, really, really hates Donald Trump. This needs to end. Later today, I'm going to vote for the 12th time Republicans will vote to reopen the government. And at least 11 times in a row, the Democrats keep voting to keep it shut down. They need to end this game.
Senator Cruz, you have what I would regard, if you'll allow me, a unique perspective on waging a battle over a shutdown, over an issue you thought was most important. Your party didn't. Ultimately, you lost in that. Do you have some advice or strategic insight for Democrats? Because you were once in a place not dissimilar, not exactly I'm not trying to compare the two precisely, but not in many ways dissimilar from where they are now.
Well, actually, the two shutdowns were very, very different. In 2013, that shutdown, what happened there, The House of Representatives passed a bill that funded the entirety of the federal government except for Obamacare and did not fund Obamacare. And what happened is Harry Reid and the Democrats in the Senate refused to pass that. They forced a shutdown then. And I think it was a mistake when Harry Reid forced a shutdown then. And I think it's a mistake now when Chuck Schumer is forcing a shutdown. But there is a very big difference. In this instance, Democrats, their demand, their ostensible demand, is they want free taxpayer-provided health care for illegal aliens. Now, that's not what the American people want. That is wildly unpopular. But at the end of the day, Major, that's not even really their demand. That's ostensibly what they're asking for. What this is about fundamentally is back in March when we kept the government open then, Democrats worked with us to keep the government open. And Chuck Schumer almost lost his job. Schumer is facing a political crisis because the extreme left wing of his party got furious with him that he kept the government open. And so this shutdown now is just, it's performance art. It is Chuck Schumer trying to show to the radicals who were marching in these rallies this weekend that he is as tough as they are and he hates Donald Trump as much as they do. And one of the problems that Schumer and the Democrats have, they don't have an exit ramp. We've been shut down 22 days. I don't know if this will continue another day, another week, another month. We could be sitting here at Thanksgiving, the busiest travel time of the year, with air traffic controllers still not being paid and delays for the flying public. That is a terrible outcome. I filed legislation to pay the air traffic controllers, pay TSA, pay the essential air personnel so that the flights can keep going. But we'll see. I think we will vote on that either this week or next. We'll see what the Democrats do. My prediction is they'll end up voting no because they're more captive to the radical base than they are listening to the needs of their constituents.
Senator Cruz, you mentioned the No Kings protests over the weekend, 5 million to 7 million. I've seen some estimates higher than that, but 5 to 7 million seems to be a representative number. That seems significant to me. Some are calling it the largest mass protest since 1970. Do you believe there's some political potency there that Republicans ought to be mindful of for 2026?
Well, listen, I will say I'm skeptical about those numbers because those numbers are self-reported, and I think the left-wing activists organizing this are wanting to inflate those numbers. But you know, what I will say also is that these protests, they're not organic. They're not just people showing up and expressing their views. Rather, this is bought and paid for, millions of dollars. George Soros actually outlined on my podcast, Verdict with Ted Cruz, I went through the receipts, how George Soros' foundation gave over $3 million to Indivisible, one of the lead groups organizing these protests. This is bought and paid for. And so there's no doubt there are some very deep-pocketed left-wing socialists on the extreme left wing. But you asked, should people be concerned? Listen, it is also true that there is a committed minority in this country that just hates Trump. And the images you're showing of people chanting and protesting, there's a group of people who, today's Democrat Party, if they stand for one thing, it is absolute hatred of Donald J. Trump. And it's become irrational. But angry people can be motivated and show up to vote. And so I'm urging Republicans. I'm concerned that normal Americans, regular people that are happy that the economy is doing better now, that the border is secure, that their families are safer, that I worry that there's some complacency of folks who are saying, hey, this is going really well. Complacency can lead to people staying home and not voting. And if one side shows up in huge numbers in November and the other side doesn't, that leads to a bad election. So we got to make sure we turn people out, everyday Americans who are glad that the economy is doing better, who are glad that the border is secure and their families are safe.
You're going to stay with us for another segment, Senator Cruz. I'm happy to say that. So my conversation with Senator Cruz will continue right after this break. You're enjoying The Takeout. Welcome back. Continue my conversation with Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz. Senator, I want to get 3 topics, and we got about 4.5 minutes. Let me start with Jimmy Kimmel. He's back on the air. He thanked you for your support. Was that a hot stove moment for the FCC and Brendan Carr?
Well, listen, I believe in free speech, and I believe in free speech regardless of which party is in power. You know, when Joe Biden was in power, the Biden FCC threatened to pull Fox News's license because they didn't like what Fox News was covering. And I led the fight against that, and we stopped that. In this instance, you had the chairman of the FCC threatening to pull the license because he didn't like what Jimmy Kimmel was saying. Now, listen, I think Jimmy Kimmel has not been funny for a long time. I think he's become a partisan, and I think screaming partisan statements is not terribly funny. But I don't believe the government should be forcing people to be censored. And so I spoke out loudly against it, and thankfully they reversed course. I'll tell you, as chairman of the Commerce Committee, I'm going to be introducing legislation, jawboning legislation, that makes it illegal for the federal government to pressure private sector actors to censor people, regardless of which party's in power. And I've enjoyed all these Democrats that are now saying they support free speech. I hope we see some bipartisan cooperation to pass my jawboning legislation and protect free speech for everyone.
We'll keep an eye on that, Senator, I promise you. Venezuela, are you satisfied with what you are seeing from the administration? Do you have any hesitation about what's going on and the implications for regime change there?
Well, listen, I'm very comfortable with the administration going after and taking out narco-terrorists. One of the first things President Trump did in his second term was designate many of these drug cartels as terrorist organizations. And there are real legal consequences when you get designated as a terrorist organization. And you're seeing them in the videos that as a terrorist organization, our military can and does engage to take out terrorists who pose a threat to America. If you look at 2 years ago, we had more than 100,000 Americans die of drug overdoses. Roughly 70% of that was fentanyl overdoses. So this is killing Americans across the country. And I'm glad President Trump is acting with real strength to say if you are engaged in narco-terrorism, the United States is going to stand up and we're going to do what we can to protect the American people.
Very quickly, you have supported legislation to require proof of citizenship to register to voters. The Secretary of State in Texas said there are 2,724 undocumented voters on the rolls out of 18 million. My audience can do the math themselves, but that's well under less than 0.1%. Is this a practical problem or a symbolic problem?
Well, I got to say, it sounds like you're endorsing the legislation because you're saying that it would not be much of a burden, that it would be easy to meet. Listen, it is hotly disputed how many illegal immigrants are voting. We know that some illegal immigrants are voting. By the way, we know, for example, the Des Moines superintendent of the public school, who was an illegal immigrant, who was a repeat criminal, who was a registered Democrat who voted. I mean, we know that it is happening. There is a dispute about how widespread it is. It is basic common sense to require that you demonstrate you're a citizen to vote. It is basic common sense to require you show a photo ID to vote. And the vast majority of Americans agree with that. The only people who disagree are partisan Democrats who will fight to the barricades to say they want no voter ID at all and no verification of citizenship. And the natural inference from that is that the Democrat Party has decided they want to encourage illegal immigrants to vote. And by the way, we know for a fact they are in places like D.C. and New York City because the city councils have legalized illegal immigrants voting. And so they're registering and voting illegal immigrants. Those same voters, I believe, are likely voting in federal elections as well. My legislation is designed to prevent that.
Senator Cruz, your staff is letting me know through my ear that you have a vote to get to. I promise you they will yell at me for going over on your behalf, but I appreciate your time, sir. We'll do this again.
Thank you, Major. Appreciate it.
The redistricting fight heats up in swing state North Carolina, giving the GOP possibly, quite possibly, an upper hand in the midterms coming up next year. We'll talk about that a little bit more here on The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. Here is a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. North Carolina Republicans have passed a new congressional map that aims to increase their party's support ahead of the next midterm elections. Republicans today in the legislature approved a plan that will very likely add an 11th member to their delegation. There are 14 congressional seats in North Carolina. This new map creates a district that appears almost unwinnable for a Democrat. Democratic governor of North Carolina, Josh Stein, does not have the ability to veto this. And barring legal challenges, which are inevitable, it is scheduled to go in effect before the 2026 elections. Chaos erupted yesterday after immigration raids in New York City. ICE agents and military vehicles rolled into Lower Manhattan and targeted street vendors, allegedly selling counterfeit goods. Immigration officials say they arrested 9 people in the country illegally, primarily from West African nations. Also, 4 protesters were taken into custody. The raids have been condemned by city and state lawmakers as well as advocates for immigrants. The Louvre reopened today for the first time since Sunday's robbery, which I'm sure you've heard plenty about. Prosecutors say thieves made off with an estimated $102 million worth of jewelry. The jewels and the thieves, well, they're still missing and unaccounted for. The museum's director, to the surprise of no one, told French lawmakers that camera coverage inside the Louvre was, quote, insufficient, meaning there's no footage of the balcony where the thieves broke in to start this smash and grab theft. That director offered to resign. That offer was refused. Still to come, a look at Russell Vogt. He's got a lot of influence. How? Why? What is he doing with it? All that to be explored next here on The Takeout. Welcome back. When the government shutdown started, it's now in day 22, President Trump posted a video that referred to Russ Vogt, head of Office of Management and Budget, as the Grim Reaper. A new article in ProPublica examines how far Vogt's influence extends. Some insiders have gone so far as to call him the true commander-in-chief. I recently sat down with the reporter who did the digging and the writing. Take a listen. ProPublica's Andy Kroll, it's great to have you with us. Thank you for joining me. The headline of your story, The Shadow President, it's about Russ Vogt, OMB Director, Office of Management and Budget. There's a quote in there, sometimes it feels like he is the commander-in-chief. Whoa, what, really?
I mean, that is coming straight from the mouth of people pretty high up in this administration, longtime senior government officials who their day-to-day life feels so tethered to the leadership, the influence, the agenda of Russ Vogt that, yeah, they
and the directives that come.
And the directives, exactly.
Because, and you point this out in great detail in the piece, the Office of Management and Budget is an underappreciated powerhouse within any executive branch, but especially this one.
That's exactly right. Democrats, Republicans, OMB is this obscure yet hugely influential institution. The thing that makes it so powerful is that every dollar that Congress appropriates down Pennsylvania Avenue, OMB basically allots out, like I've compared it to like a diligent parent giving out allowance. You get your money on a regular basis, but don't spend it too fast. But if you have someone in there like Russ Vogt who says, I'm cutting off the money, period, then OMB becomes quite powerful.
And it's not just that, though that is significant.
Yeah.
It's regulations and review, it's executive orders. So much of what this president has set in motion and his reevaluation and much larger, more expansive sense of federal power and executive power flows through Russ Vogt.
OMB is the closest thing to centralized government in the United States bureaucracy, and Russ Vogt has dreamt for 20 years of having that job. He has studied OMB. He's not like the classic Trump advisor, loyal, consigliere, whatever, to the president. He's a wonk. He's a spreadsheet nerd by his own description. He's someone who knows the federal budget inside and out, and now he has this job where he can pull the levers of power in a way that no one else can in the government.
One of the best compliments I can give anyone is I wish I had written what you wrote.
I'll take that compliment.
He speaks in a flat, nasally monotone, and with his tortoiseshell glasses, standard issue blue suits, and corona of close-cropped hair, most resembles what he claims to despise, a federal bureaucrat.
Corona I borrowed from Tom Wolfe. May he rest in peace. The rest of that, yes.
If you can borrow from anyone, borrow from Tom Wolfe with an E.
Borrow from the best, exactly.
Yes. He looks like a bureaucrat, and yet he definitely has a kind of career-long animosity to what the bureaucracy, from his point of view, has created.
He has said publicly that he thinks the bureaucracy hates the American public. He believes that there really is a deep state, and he wants to be the one to crush it. And I think that was a view that he developed kind of from the outside when he worked on Capitol Hill, when he worked for the Heritage Foundation's advocacy arm, Heritage Action. But I think he saw it firsthand in a very visceral way in the first Trump administration, and then spent those 4 years between the two Trump presidencies laying the groundwork for how he would take on this supposed deep state in the most aggressive, most effective way possible. We're seeing that now.
Andy, how does the shutdown empower him in ways that he imagined but few others in Washington did?
I obtained a bunch of previously unreported briefings he'd given, speeches he delivered. And one thing that he said over the years that struck me, and even more so now, he has long seen federal government shutdowns as this moment to utilize, to find leverage, and to push through things that can't otherwise happen in the normal order of government. He has said that Republicans should want a speaker who has a love of shutdowns, because shutdowns are, and this is him talking, how we save the country. And so right now, he is in his element. He sees this shutdown as the way to temporarily or permanently close agencies, fire workers, freeze funding, to do all the things that he wants to do in a very concentrated way. The shutdown for him is this sprint toward enacting all of these goals he's had, in some cases for decades.
That predate President Trump. President Trump describes this in harshly partisan terms. Democrat programs, Democrat agencies. Does he see it that way, or does he believe the entire bureaucracy created by Republicans and Democrats is at fault?
He sees it the latter way. He believes that Republicans and Democrats are almost equally at fault. I spoke with a former colleague of his when Vogt worked on Capitol Hill, and his colleague said something remarkable. He said, Russ saw the Republican leadership as a bigger impediment to conservative goals than Democrats. He believed that Republicans were insufficiently conservative. They betrayed their constituents.
All rhetoric, no action.
All rhetoric, no action. All hat, no cattle. Exactly. And that it was Donald Trump who sort of broke that status quo and created the moment to do what Vogt has wanted to do.
The headline is the Shadow President. If you want to know about a very powerful person in Washington right now, you need to read it. Andy Kroll, I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, mate. Thank you.
Thank you. George Santos, he's back, and he talks to CBS News about his, quote, not so nice time in prison. It's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. President Trump just said this. Price tag for the new White House ballroom, now $300 million. That is an increase of $100 million, and it didn't take very long. Just a moment ago, the president talked about the plan, which we'll now see, CBS News has confirmed, the entire East Wing demolished. Listen.
Over the years, many presidents have made changes. This obviously would be the biggest change, but this was something they've wanted for at least 150 years.
Well, maybe, maybe not. We certainly know that ballroom is going to be very gold based on the picture he was just holding, like the Oval Office itself. I want to bring in our reporter panel, Deepa Shivram, White House correspondent for NPR. Eleanor Mueller covers Congress for Semaphore. So any thoughts that you have on the demolition of the East Wing and this new ballroom and the costs?
I mean, it's certainly...
Which we should say is not all coming from President Trump. Yeah. Private donors are going to pony up, and that will clearly create avenues for them to communicate with the president in ways that they otherwise would not have.
Yeah, I think maybe we start with the fact that, like, the White House is a deeply significant and historical building. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to imagine just taking a bulldozer to a building this historic, exactly, without any kind of transparency, oversight, the process that has been in place to, you know, if there are changes made to the White House, which has happened before over the course of time. It's a very old building, but there is a process in place for what should happen when changes are requested to be made or presidents want to make changes. And what we've seen is a president making a number of small changes in the White House. We were just talking about the gold in the Oval Office, for one. The Rose Garden certainly looks different than it did 4 years ago. But this is a pretty large amount of construction happening right outside Pennsylvania Avenue that is going to have a really big impact and I guess is going to cost a lot of money.
Eleanor, we talked to some folks outside the White House today about this, and I believe our control room has this. Joe Thompson and Robert Massey. If we have it, play it.
So funny they're saying how Trump's destroying everything. Go back through history. All the different presidents. Truman gutted the place. Roosevelt made the West Wing. Nixon had his bowling alley. JFK had a swimming pool. So, he's adding his touch. And it's going to be beautiful when it's done.
It's sacred ground. Like I say, past president has done it, yes, like I say, but now when so much going on, a ballroom is the last thing that people need. Unless you're going to have a big block party for, like I say, he's going to invite me. I'll come.
Andrew Jackson style, big block party and invite everyone to come in. And
big block of cheese.
Yeah, exactly. Big block of cheese and claw through the windows and everything else. Eleanor, thoughts?
Well, I think we're seeing some signs on the Trump administration's behalf that they might know that they're in some hot water here. They've told the employees at the Treasury Department to not share photos of the East Wing as it's under demolition. They've said now that they will provide the plans that they should have provided in the first place. And so, but of course, the damage has already been done. They've already taken a bulldozer to it. And so where we go from here, I think it's an open question.
We talked about this when I went to break. George Santos talked to CBS. Let's listen to what he had to say. He's had his sentence commuted by President Trump. He's now out of jail.
I have been given an opportunity to rewrite the ending of my life, and I will make sure that it's as honorable as humanly possible and above reproach at all times, because it would be an absolute ungodly irresponsibility to not take advantage of this and do it in the best way possible. I just want to do good.
I don't want to harsh his mellow, but let's just remind ourselves he denied he ever did anything wrong. Yep. Serially. And now he's acknowledging that he did something wrong. So let's just put that in context. Deepa?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I just feel like we're living in this state of 900 things are happening at the same time.
We certainly are.
You think that we're done talking about someone like George Santos, and then it comes up as a major news item again today. And it just, it also speaks to, I think, a lot of that, the almost strategy that comes out of the Trump administration too, right? Where it's like we flood the zone, and there's just a lot of flooding of the zone right now. No doubt. George Santos is in that bubble.
Eleanor, you have some new reporting on Marjorie Taylor Greene and her continued evolution within the House Republican Conference.
Yeah, I spoke with her on Friday. What's fascinating is that she does not see this at all as an evolution. She says she's doing the same thing she's been doing since she ran for office, which is hold Republican policymakers accountable for not doing what they said they would do when they campaigned. She has been outspoken in her criticisms throughout the last couple of years. She pretty infamously challenged Speaker Mike Johnson, spoke out against the Trump administration's Iran strikes, but we've seen a huge ramp up in the last weeks, sparked by the Republican Party's reluctance to negotiate with Democrats over healthcare tax credits. And so she's talking about how healthcare isn't affordable. She's talking about how she wants a House vote on the Epstein files, all of these things. And what is even more surprising, I think, than a very conservative MAGA lawmaker saying all these things out loud is that she's managed to do it in a way that has not isolated President Donald Trump. He tweeted about Rand Paul, tweeted about Thomas Massie on Friday night, and then he said he was going to release George Santos, which is something that Marjorie Taylor Greene has desperately wanted. And so how she's managed to pull that off, I think a lot of people would like to know.
Great to have you with us, Eleanor Mueller, Deepa Shivaram. I appreciate it. Remember, the candy does not eat itself. You already got into some of it, Deepa. I appreciate you. One thing I want to say before we do the regular, Frank, thanks for saying hi today. It was great to meet you. I'm glad you love the show. Happy Wednesday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report starts now.